Back in school, Baeksun could barely steady herself when the teacher called her to the front of the class. Even so, she managed to share a simple dream. She wanted to grow into a wonderful adult. It was not a detailed career plan, only a child's faith that growing older would eventually turn fear into confidence. The years deliver a much harsher answer. At 26, Baeksun is completely unemployed, and the confidence she once hoped to gain has been replaced by a routine built around sleeping and online games. Another loss sends her shouting at her teammates from a room already crowded with trash. Her hands strike the desk, a drink overturns beside the keyboard, and the mess at her feet makes the distance from that childhood ambition impossible to miss. Nothing about the defeat is important enough to justify the reaction, yet the game receives all the urgency that the rest of her life has lost. Once the anger passes, boredom settles in again. Baeksun is tired of playing, but stopping leaves her with no better idea for the day. The next distraction only sharpens the joke at her expense. A video about a filthy studio apartment has her condemning the stranger who lives there, even though her own floor is buried beneath bags, boxes, bottles, and scattered belongings. She laughs at someone else for living exactly as she does. The stranger's mess is entertainment because Baeksun never has to step inside it. Her own has become so familiar that she barely registers it. By any honest measure, the person judging that disaster has become one herself. Only hunger finally breaks the spell. Baeksun realizes she has not eaten all day and leaves the computer in search of the easiest possible meal. The kitchen offers an overflowing sink instead. Cleaning it would create precisely the kind of work she has spent the day avoiding. So instant noodles become the obvious escape. Every shortcut preserves the larger problem. Using as little as possible means washing as little as possible. She prepares the noodles without addressing the dishes, carries the meal back into her room, and eats among the old containers already gathered there. A cooled mixed coffee serves as dessert. The meal solves hunger without asking Baeksun to change anything that caused the kitchen to reach this point. Warm and full again, she returns to the computer with no sign that the apartment around her will receive the same attention. The cycle has carried her from one temporary comfort to the next, and ranked play is waiting to take over once more. This match goes unusually well. Baeksun survives long enough that only one opponent stands between her and first place out of 95 players. For a few minutes, the ranking gives her the progress and recognition missing everywhere else. Then, the noise from next door begins cutting through the game. Her headset is nearby, but she left it off because it hurts her ears, and stopping to put it on now would interrupt the momentum she has built. She tries to endure the disturbance and keep playing, becoming more aware of every sound as the final contest tightens. The lost concentration costs her the decisive exchange, leaving her in second place when victory had seemed close enough to touch. The result brings all of her frustration rushing back. Baeksun pounds the desk, knocks over the drink beside her, and sends liquid down the wall and across the floor. A lost match has become damage that her mother might discover. The fear is revealing. Even in an apartment of her own, Baeksun expects someone else to judge the consequences. She presses a cloth against the stain and scrubs, but the mark refuses to come away. Cleaning becomes urgent only after the mess threatens to expose her, and by then panic is no substitute for care. Worry about replacing what she damaged keeps building until the cleanup gives way to another outburst. Baeksun strikes the wall, pounds the desk again, and answers the disturbance next door with a burst of noise of her own. When it is over, she drops back into her chair, having become every bit as disruptive as the neighbor she blames. This is not a brief pause between jobs or a single bad week. She is 26 years old, already in her second year without work, and still no closer to the wonderful adult she once promised herself she would become. A delivery arrives at the apartment, but even opening the door becomes an ordeal for Baeksun. She keeps herself out of sight while the worker leaves the box behind, then waits until the hallway is safe before pulling it inside. No conversation is required, and still she treats the possibility of being seen as a threat. The caution is excessive for such an ordinary exchange, yet it suits a life that is narrowed to one cluttered room. Contact with the outside world now happens through a closed door, a phone, or a game account whenever Baeksun can arrange it. Once the door is locked again, curiosity takes over. The package gives her something new to focus on, and for a moment the unopened box seems more inviting than everything she has been avoiding around it. Inside is food that ought to be put away, but the refrigerator is already packed. Baeksun tries to squeeze the delivery into the remaining space and quickly discovers that there is nowhere sensible for it to go. Cold air has preserved the illusion that the contents can be dealt with later, allowing every postponed decision to remain inside. Containers have been stacked and forgotten until the appliance is less a place to store meals than a record of meals she never finished. Shifting one item only exposes another, and forcing the new food on top would continue the same pattern. What began as a simple delivery now forces her to confront the backlog she has kept hidden behind the refrigerator door. She searches through the crowded kitchen for a solution, moving past dishes and supplies that have accumulated without order. Any usable container would need to be washed first, which leads directly to the chore she least wants to do. There is no clever route around it this time. The new delivery cannot be stored until some of the old neglect is removed. Baeksun hesitates, bargains with herself, and finally accepts that the sink cannot be ignored forever. The decision is hardly heroic, but in this apartment it counts as a campaign. Starting proves more difficult than continuing. One dish leads to another. The pile gradually loses its power to intimidate her, and the space slowly begins to look usable again. The final container is the worst of them. Its contents have been left long enough to spoil, turning a routine cleaning job into something she can barely stomach. The smell and decay reveal what postponement has actually been doing while the refrigerator door stayed shut. Baeksun recoils, works through the disgust, and clears it anyway. Throwing the food away also means admitting that money, effort, and a meal were all wasted. As the neglected contents disappear, thoughts of her mother creep in. The apartment has been allowed to reach a condition Baeksun would rather keep secret, and every discarded container is another reminder of how much of her life has been maintained from a distance by someone else. By the end, the refrigerator and sink are no longer completely overwhelmed. The result brings genuine relief, along with the realization that the entire crisis came from many tiny choices to deal with things later. Baeksun decides that ordering food cannot continue at the same pace, especially when it creates waste she neither eats nor cleans. The resolution sounds practical in the quiet of the kitchen. Night arrives, hunger returns, and the convenience of another meal is immediately tempting again. A clean space does not remove the habit that filled it, and one burst of effort cannot organize the days ahead. Her brief victory over the mess has not transformed Baeksun, but it has forced her to notice the pattern. For now, that uncomfortable awareness is the only change that lasts beyond the cleanup. Baeksun wakes at 6:30 after sleeping for roughly 14 hours. The long rest has not produced a productive morning or even a clear sense of what to do next. So much of the day has already disappeared that returning to bed would hardly make it feel more wasted. Her attention returns almost immediately to the game, where a limited time reward offers a reason to log in. A spinning pinwheel and a list of quests turn the empty hours ahead into small, measurable tasks. The reward is artificial, but the deadline is real enough to command her attention. Those goals matter only inside the game, yet there Baeksun can at least pursue a target and know exactly when she has succeeded. The reward chase carries her into the game's social spaces. Other players are already arguing in the chat, and Baeksun inserts herself into the dispute with the certainty of someone who has spent far too much time there. An account name offers distance from the person sitting alone in the apartment, making aggression easier and embarrassment less immediate. Messages arrive faster, positions harden, and a minor disagreement becomes a contest over who can provoke whom. The game may provide structure, but the people inside it are perfectly capable of creating chaos. Leaving would cost Baeksun nothing, although it would also mean allowing someone else to have the last word. She keeps responding, increasingly invested in an exchange that offers nothing worth winning. Then the argument acquires a real price. Through the confrontation and the choices surrounding it, Baeksun loses 50,000 in game currency. The loss is large enough to sting, especially for someone who depends on the game for both entertainment and money. Time spent accumulating that value disappears in the same space where she had expected a reward. Other players seize on the mistake and begin taunting her. Their amusement ensures that Baeksun cannot treat the loss as a private error and move on. What had been an abstract quarrel now feels personal. Her focus shifts from completing quests to answering the people enjoying her setback, and every new message makes restraint less likely. She tries to retaliate through private messages, carrying the fight away from the public chat without actually ending it. Moving the exchange does not make it private in the sense that matters. Every message can still be reported. The insults continue, and Baeksun gives back as much hostility as she receives. For a few heated minutes, striking at the other player matters more than the account she has spent so many hours building. The game has become both her refuge and a fragile asset, but anger makes her gamble with both at once. That imbalance is exactly what the moderation system notices. The exchange leaves a record, and satisfaction that lasts only a moment is about to cost her far more time than the original loss. The punishment arrives as a 7-day ban. Baeksun can no longer enter the game that organizes nearly every part of her day. The quests, the chat, and even the income she draws from selling game currency are suddenly inaccessible. Moderation has imposed the boundaries she refused to set for herself, and there is no teammate she can blame for the result. A fight over 50,000 has ended by locking her out of the place where she hoped to recover it. With the account unavailable, the room around her has nowhere to disappear. 7 days would be a short inconvenience in a busier life. Here it opens an enormous stretch of unplanned time. Baeksun is left without her usual escape, and the silence outside the game feels much larger than the ban notice itself. The ban creates an immediate financial problem. Baeksun usually earns about 20,000 a week through the game, and she cannot sell anything while the account is locked. That amount is modest, but it is the only regular income she has arranged for herself. The punishment therefore reaches beyond entertainment and into the budget for food and daily expenses. With little money available and no plan for replacing it, she calls her mother. The conversation is not a proud one. Her mother has already helped recently and responds with exasperation at how quickly the support disappears. Baeksun needs help covering an ordinary week because an argument inside a game has cut off the fragile income on which she was relying. After the call, she begins calculating what she can spend and what can be postponed. Her mother's anger makes the shortage feel less like bad luck and more like a problem Baeksun is expected to solve. Even small recurring costs now deserve scrutiny. YouTube remains one of her main distractions, but watching without a paid subscription means sitting through advertisements. Canceling a convenience is easier than finding work, and that makes it the first sacrifice she can imagine. Baeksun weighs uninterrupted entertainment against the money she does not have. The exercise resembles budgeting, though it is driven less by a new discipline than by the fact that every easy option is starting to close at once. The advertisements interrupt one video after another. Saving money has produced an immediate cost in patience, and Baeksun resents paying it even while knowing why it is necessary. Chores already feel difficult to begin, and each unwanted pause makes her more irritated with the entertainment meant to carry her through them. Returning to the banned game is impossible, so there is no familiar escape when the videos become annoying. The apartment contains plenty that needs attention, but all of it loses to the irritation arriving from the phone. Baeksun moves through the day with her patience thinning, trapped between work she dislikes and distractions that no longer operate on her terms. One advertisement promotes a puzzle game. At first it is only another interruption, the sort of sales pitch Baeksun would normally dismiss while waiting for the real video to resume. Repetition does its work, placing the same promise in front of someone with time to fill and nowhere else to go. This game offers novelty at precisely the moment her usual account is unavailable. Curiosity survives her irritation and gradually becomes the easiest answer to boredom. Baeksun follows the advertisement, downloads the puzzle, and gives the product the attention it was designed to capture. The choice leaves the week's problems unsolved, but it restores the familiar sensation of having something to tap and complete. The day ends with a small but unmistakable surrender. After resisting the ads and complaining about them, she lets one choose her next game. Baeksun passes the time with cat videos while eating ramen and drinking coffee. The animals are entertaining, because they are safely contained inside someone else's life, requiring nothing from her beyond another click. Their small acts of chaos are charming when another owner is responsible for the consequences. Her own meal is as improvised as usual, and the apartment remains a place where convenience wins by default. The videos also offer companionship without conversation, well suited to someone who hid from a delivery worker. Then the day's money alerts intrude. Whatever comfort the animals offer cannot change the balance Baeksun has to manage outside them. She eventually heads outdoors and encounters several cats in the middle of a noisy confrontation. The real animals are louder and less conveniently edited than the ones she has been watching. Baeksun tries to shoo them away, treating the commotion as one more irritation to remove from her path. Most scatter, apparently confirming that a quick gesture will end the problem. A gray cat refuses to behave as expected. It stays close instead of fleeing, watching her with enough confidence to interrupt the annoyance she had prepared to feel. That refusal turns an indistinct group of strays into one animal Baeksun can no longer ignore. The gray cat approaches and rubs against her. Baeksun's resistance weakens almost immediately. A little affection achieves what the earlier noise could not, replacing her desire to escape with concern for the animal. She checks what little money she has, and finds only 200 won to spare, hardly enough to turn the encounter into a grand act of generosity. Spending any of it matters after the budget crisis, especially on a cat that does not belong to her. Even so, she goes back rather than leave the animal behind. The decision is small and inconvenient, which makes it stand out against a routine usually organized around avoiding both effort and expense. With the cat beside her, Baeksun begins imagining what it would be like to keep it. She pets the animal and lets the pleasant version of that future expand. Companionship, affection, and a home made less empty by another living presence. In that imagined arrangement, the warmth is immediate, while feeding, cleaning, and veterinary care remain conveniently distant. The fantasy moves much faster than the practical questions. Baeksun has known the cat for only moments, yet loneliness makes the bond feel ready-made. For a while, the animal is not another responsibility waiting to become difficult. It is proof that something might choose to stay with her. Baeksun offers part of a snack, expecting the gentle mood to continue. Sharing food seems like the natural next step in the relationship she has already begun inventing. The cat responds with sudden aggression. Affection becomes scrambling, the imagined bond vanishes, and Baeksun ends up falling in the confusion. Unlike an online clip, the encounter cannot be paused at the cute moment or cut before the animal changes its mind. It closes the distance between charming cat videos and the unpredictable creature in front of her. Baeksun had been ready to build a whole future from one friendly nuzzle. A few seconds later, she is on the ground learning how little that fantasy guaranteed. After only about 2 hours of sleep, Baeksun is still awake at sunrise. Construction noise begins outside, while rowdy men nearby add another layer to the disturbance. The thin separation between her room and everyone around it offers no protection from either source. Every sound becomes an offense in her exhausted state. Rest might have given her patience, but exhaustion converts inconvenience into provocation. She tries to endure it, but the pressure keeps building until remaining inside feels no calmer than confronting the source. The morning has barely started, and Baeksun is already carrying the frustration of someone who never received a night. She goes out and shouts at the men, demanding the quiet she could not find in her apartment. Speaking up may feel better than lying awake, but it requires Baeksun to challenge people whose reaction she cannot control. The confrontation gives her anger somewhere to go, and briefly reverses the helplessness of listening from behind a wall. It does little to make the situation safer or simpler. Baeksun leaves before the exchange can grow further. Instead of returning to bed, she moves into a street already occupied by other people's arguments, carrying the same short temper into a setting with even fewer boundaries. A dispute has broken out over feeding stray cats. One side objects to the mess and nuisance, the other is determined to care for the animals. Baeksun has just discovered how quickly sympathy for a stray can become complicated, but this argument extends far beyond one friendly encounter. She is not part of the quarrel, yet she is pulled into it before she can pass. Her presence becomes useful to people who want another voice on their side, regardless of whether she has chosen one. Too tired to navigate the competing demands, Baeksun finds herself trapped in a conflict she neither started nor understands well enough to settle. Avoiding involvement now requires more effort than the strangers are willing to allow. The disagreement turns physical and increasingly chaotic. Positions that were already rigid become impossible to discuss once bodies begin colliding. More men emerge, making the street feel crowded with potential trouble. Baeksun, who had begun the morning by yelling for silence, is now surrounded by a much larger disturbance. The difference between expressing anger and being caught inside someone else's becomes painfully clear. Her confidence drains as quickly as the number of participants grows. A woman who charged outside, ready to confront noise, is reduced to looking for the safest exit. What remains is a quiet effort to get free without giving anyone another reason to focus on her. Once an opening appears, Baeksun runs. She pushes herself until nausea catches up with the exhaustion, escaping the quarrel at the cost of what little energy she had left. The body that received only 2 hours of sleep now has to carry her away from a problem she never meant to join. The morning offers no resolution, only distance. Returning to the same apartment promises the same walls and the same proximity to strangers. When her thoughts finally turn toward relief, they settle on the image of a spacious house where construction, shouting, and disputes could not reach her so easily. The dream asks for money and stability that Baeksun does not have, but it still gives her somewhere quieter to imagine. For someone living amid constant interruption, privacy has become the most luxurious wish of all. Baeksun's mother makes her way across town by bus, checking the route and map as she approaches the apartment. Reaching her daughter requires time, transfers, and attention to a route Baeksun rarely has reason to consider. The trip is deliberate. Unlike the drifting hours waiting at the other end, a phone call would allow vague answers and a quick change of subject. This visit will not. Her mother is coming close enough to see the life her daughter has been describing only from a distance, along with everything Baeksun has preferred to leave outside their conversations. Inside, Baeksun is passing another slow middle of the day when she hears someone at the door. The interruption catches her unprepared just as the delivery did, but this visitor cannot be avoided by waiting silently. Before Baeksun can shape the room or herself into anything more presentable, her mother enters and startles her. The unexpected arrival collapses the distance on which Baeksun's independence depends. Surprise gives way to an embrace, and the affection between them is genuine. Warmth cannot hide what surrounds them, however, nor can it prevent her mother from understanding how the apartment reached this condition. Her mother begins cleaning. There is no long debate over where to start because bags, dishes, laundry, and scattered belongings make the priorities obvious. The visit turns into a practical campaign through the apartment. Baeksun is swept along, helping because there is no longer any way to pretend the work can wait. Her mother's momentum removes the pauses in which Baeksun usually bargains herself out of a chore. Each cleared surface exposes how much had accumulated, and how little space the mess left for ordinary life. The room changes more in a short visit than it has during weeks of Baeksun living there alone, demonstrating the difference between intending to clean and continuing until the work is done. Once the worst of the mess is under control, the conversation reaches the harder subject of Baeksun's future. Her mother asks about writing, the ambition that still exists, even though little has been produced. This is the goal that helps explain being unemployed, yet it cannot serve as an explanation forever without finished work behind it. Baeksun has no satisfying progress to report. Talking about writing preserves the possibility that she might still become someone different. Admitting how little she has done threatens that possibility. Cleaning can make the room look different in an afternoon. The work Baeksun says she wants to do offers no such quick proof, and her mother's question leaves the absence exposed. Before leaving, her mother gives her an allowance. The money solves an immediate problem while quietly underlining how dependent Baeksun remains. Her mother has cleaned the home, questioned the stalled ambition, and still provided the support her adult daughter cannot yet provide for herself. Gratitude and embarrassment arrive together. Then the apartment becomes still again, newly cleaned but otherwise unchanged. Baeksun is left with more space, more money, and the same responsibility to decide what happens next. The pause does not last. A knock comes from next door, linking the visit to the neighbor whose noise has already caused so much trouble. Baeksun has barely finished dealing with one person who can see through her excuses when another arrives at the door. The knocking continues while Baeksun pretends no one is home. Hiding worked for the delivery, but the person outside is more persistent and has reason to believe the apartment is occupied. Each unanswered knock lengthens the encounter Baeksun hoped to avoid. Silence fails to end the visit, leaving her to choose between opening the door and remaining trapped behind it. When she finally gives in, the visitor is not an anonymous stranger. Baeksun recognizes the blonde neighbor, connected to the noise that ruined her match, and the complaint she shouted through the wall has now returned in person. The neighbor has come to complain about Baeksun's own outburst. Their exchange quickly becomes defensive because both women entered it prepared to be the injured party. Baeksun objects to the noise from next door, while the other woman makes it clear that no boyfriend is responsible for what she heard. The correction complicates Baeksun's assumptions without softening either side. Each believes the disturbance began with someone else, and neither is interested in accepting the full blame. Living inches apart has allowed them to know one another only as sounds and annoyances. The brief confrontation turns the anonymous apartment next door into a specific person who is just as irritated as Baeksun and equally capable of carrying a grievance to the door. After the neighbor leaves, Baeksun remains angry and embarrassed. She has defended herself, but the defense cannot erase the fact that her own pounding and shouting traveled through the same wall. Baeksun turns back to her plans, prepares for a trip to the bank, and tries to restore an ordinary rhythm to the day. The allowance gives her a practical reason to go out, while the encounter gives her another reason not to linger near the apartment. Still, the argument keeps echoing despite her effort to move on. Eventually, sleep takes over, postponing the errand and leaving both the money and the tension for morning. The next day, Baeksun finds the blonde woman outside in a very different condition. Yesterday's confidence has collapsed. The neighbor is drunk, crying, and overwhelmed by the end of another relationship. This is her fourth breakup, suggesting that the crisis feels familiar, without becoming any easier for her to bear. The complaint about noise gives way to a much more personal explanation for the chaos next door. She describes herself as emotionally deprived, reaching for comfort with the urgency of someone who does not want to be alone. Baeksun wanted only to complete an errand, but walking past now would mean ignoring distress that has been placed directly in her path. The two women exchange basic details amid the tears. The neighbor is 22, younger than Baeksun, and learns Baeksun's name as the awkward conversation continues. Knowing their ages and names makes them less anonymous without making them friends. Baeksun is not prepared to become a confidant simply because she opened the door the previous day. Her own life is disorganized enough without inheriting someone else's breakup. Even so, refusing comfort is difficult when the request arrives through tears rather than another angry knock. Baeksun listens, tries to keep some distance, and looks for a chance to leave before the stranger's heartbreak becomes her responsibility. Leaving is harder than expected. The neighbor clings to Baeksun and refuses to let the moment end, replacing any polite exit with a physical struggle. Comfort has become confinement. Their movement draws attention and creates the kind of misunderstanding that cannot be explained quickly to anyone passing by. Every attempt to separate makes the scene look stranger. Baeksun, who usually works so hard to avoid being noticed, is now stuck supporting a sobbing woman she barely knows. The situation punishes exactly the instinct she followed at the door. Avoiding an awkward exchange has led to a far more public one. The neighbor's noise once reached Baeksun through a wall. Now the entire problem is attached to her in the open. Back at home, Baeksun eats udon, checks her balance and tries to write. The cleaned room and the allowance from her mother have removed a few immediate pressures, giving her fewer excuses to delay. The empty page remains. Baeksun can arrange the tools, settle at the desk, and wait for concentration without producing the work itself. Unlike a game quest, writing supplies no automatic reward for logging in, and no spinning marker to turn effort into progress. The attempt stalls, and the gap between wanting to be a writer and actually writing becomes impossible to ignore. Baeksun has spent 2 years trying to make this life work without moving forward. The label of writer protects the dream she once had, but 2 years without finished work have made that protection thin. The possibility of finding a regular job returns, carrying her back 4 years to when she was 22 and preparing for an interview. At that age, employment still looked like a path into adulthood rather than evidence that another plan had failed. She could be nervous about entering working life because she had not yet learned how quickly it might go wrong. The memory begins at home, with her parents treating the interview as a serious test. Her father gives advice with the intensity of a commander sending someone into battle. The exaggeration is comic, although it reflects how much hope her family has placed on an ordinary interview. Baeksun leaves with that pressure behind her and arrives to wait for the company representative. Waiting gives anxiety time to grow before anyone asks the first question. The office does not project polished confidence. When the interviewer finally arrives, his rough manner and the atmosphere around the company make the opportunity feel less secure than she had imagined, turning the evaluation in both directions. The interview exposes the weakness of Baeksun's qualifications. She has little experience to offer and no impressive record that can carry the conversation for her. Every question therefore places more weight on confidence she does not naturally possess. Attention shifts toward the risks of joining such a small, uncertain workplace. The representative does not disguise those risks behind polished recruiting language. The company may not offer stability, but Baeksun is also in no position to demand guarantees. Employer and applicant are each evaluating how much uncertainty the other can tolerate, and neither side has enough leverage to make the arrangement feel safe. Baeksun tries to prove that her resolve can compensate for what her resume lacks. She answers seriously, pushes through the awkwardness, and attempts to present herself as someone ready to work. Determination is the one qualification she can offer without needing evidence from a previous employer. Then practical curiosity breaks through and she asks about the salary. The question is reasonable, especially in a workplace already asking her to accept risk, yet its timing changes the tone. The brave version of Baeksun she has been performing gives way to a young applicant who still needs to know what the sacrifice will pay. Another strained exchange follows, and the interview ends without a clear promise. She returns home, unsure whether anything came from the effort. Without an answer, every awkward question, an uncertain reaction, can be interpreted as the moment that ruined her chances. The conversation with her parents carries the same uncertainty, with Baeksun left to replay the interview and wait. Her father's earlier battlefield confidence cannot decide the outcome now. No triumphant result arrives that day. The interview joins the growing collection of moments when adulthood seems to depend on decisions being made somewhere beyond Baeksun's control, even after she has done everything she was told to do. Later, her father brings the news. The company has offered her the job. Relief arrives through the same parent who prepared her so intensely for the interview, turning the family's anxiety into celebration. Against the rough exchange, her limited experience, and all the risks discussed, Baeksun has been accepted. At 22, acceptance is enough to make the uncertainty feel worthwhile. The memory provides a sharp counterpoint to the present. 4 years earlier, she crossed into working life, despite every reason to doubt the opportunity. Now, after 2 years without a job and without meaningful progress on her writing, Baeksun is sitting at another threshold and wondering whether she can make that crossing again. In the memory of her first job, Baeksun finishes tidying and prepares for a new beginning. Receiving the offer has transformed uncertainty into a date, a place, and a morning on which she is expected to arrive. She treats that morning as something important enough to protect with multiple alarms. The room, her clothes, and the plan are all arranged so the first day can begin properly. Preparation gives her the reassuring sense that success can be secured in advance. For once, adulthood seems close enough to schedule. Then, Baeksun remains on her phone longer than she intended. One more stretch of scrolling undermines all the care she put into the next morning. The alarms fail to rescue her, and she wakes late. Preparation collapses into panic as Baeksun rushes out, takes a taxi, and watches the time she meant to control slip away. The fare consumes money before the new job has paid her anything, but being late on the first day feels even more costly. Her first commute to the company becomes an expensive attempt to recover from a mistake made before the work has even begun. Arrival brings another awkward moment at the entrance. Nothing is familiar enough to let Baeksun move with the confidence of someone who belongs there. She struggles through the setting until an employee notices and greets her. The welcome gives Baeksun someone to follow, but it cannot erase the impression that she has entered the day off balance. Every ordinary interaction feels like part of an evaluation that began with the interview and never clearly ended. She introduces herself and is led farther inside, trying to absorb the customs of a workplace she knows almost nothing about. The tour confirms how small the company is. There are few people, limited space, and a desk that has not been prepared with much care. The disorganization matches the uncertainty discussed during the interview, but Baeksun has already accepted that bargain by arriving. She takes in the mess and waits for the team leader who has not yet arrived. Administrative tasks fill the gap. Forms, instructions, and basic setup give her the motions of being an employee before anyone has explained what her actual work will be. For the moment, employment consists of waiting for authority to arrive and trying not to make another mistake. Co-workers begin to gather, offering names and fragments of the office hierarchy. Each introduction gives Baeksun another relationship to remember before she knows what any of them expect from her. When the team leader finally enters, the delayed meeting carries more weight than the casual welcome that came before it. Baeksun has spent the morning trying to recover her composure, using every small task to prove that the late start does not define her. Now, the person with authority over her first job is present. She waits to learn where she fits, expecting the real workday to begin at last. The team leader calls Baeksun over almost immediately. She has no body of work to defend and no history at the company to place between herself and whatever is coming. Instead of receiving an assignment or a proper start, Baeksun is told to resign. The instruction lands before she has had the chance to perform the job she fought to reach. Acceptance, it turns out, did not guarantee that anyone had prepared a place for her. Multiple alarms, a frantic taxi ride, the tour, and the paperwork have all delivered Baeksun to a workplace that is already pushing her back out. The first day ends at the point where it was supposed to begin, leaving one brutal question hanging over the memory. How did an offer of employment turn into a demand that she leave? Baeksun's first day at the company has just begun, and she is already confused. He lights a cigarette, apologizes for the smoke, and mentions that smoking has become just a habit for him. Jukyung, her team leader, immediately states that the company is not a great place to work. Baeksun tries to hide her reaction as he warns her at the entrance that the company will wear her down. He points to his own scalp as evidence that working here causes stress that affects one's appearance. Baeksun asks why he stays if the place is so bad. He explains that he is committed to a 2-year program and cannot leave until it is finished. He says he has his reasons for staying and notes that almost no one lasts more than 3 months at the company. High employee turnover appears to be common at the company. Jukyung's warning is meant to be honest, but Baeksun wonders who would disclose such negativity on their first day. Baeksun starts to suspect this might be a test for new hires. She thinks that perhaps the company wants to filter out those who are not fully committed. Noticing herself flinch, she realizes that others are likely watching her reactions. A coworker comments that Baeksun does not seem loyal and jokes that her eye twitched at the harsh description of the workplace. Someone else suggests that the job is designed in an old-fashioned manner to filter out weaker employees. Baeksun tries to ignore these remarks and tells herself that she is resilient and can handle the challenges ahead. She puts on a confident front, asserting that she was born for this job and can face any obstacle. An older coworker, perhaps acknowledging her confidence, laughs and suggests they get along from now on. Baeksun agrees and smiles, though she remains uncertain about the social dynamics at play. 3 months later, Baeksun's initial confidence has not resulted in job satisfaction. She cannot understand why she keeps receiving unusual tasks, especially legal or official matters that make her uneasy. Though she wants to ask Jukyung for assistance, he appears very busy. Before she can withdraw, a senior colleague comes over to inquire if she is having difficulties with the documents. Startled, Baeksun admits that she gets scared easily. The colleague expresses surprise at her nervousness, jokes that he is not scary, and says he intended to help, offering assistance if needed. Baeksun confesses that the official document terms are difficult to interpret alone. The colleague glances at the documents and quickly changes his tone. He says that handling these tasks independently is part of the learning process and insists she should manage on her own. He claims it will be worthwhile once she gets through it, but it feels to Baeksun like he is dismissing her concerns. After he leaves, Baeksun tries not to show her frustration. She reflects that he never truly helps, only sends random messages after hours, and is absent when needed. She wonders why the team leader Baekhan never reviews their work. He always says he is busy, instructs her to submit work, but then returns it requiring revisions. This ongoing grind and lack of support lead Baeksun to consider quitting. At her lowest point, a coworker asks if Baeksun can help organize some files. Although she is busy reviewing a confusing document, she agrees to assist. The coworker sympathizes, admitting that they also struggled with similar documents at first. The coworker adds that the process gradually became easier with experience. This honesty provides Baeksun with some comfort, knowing others have faced the same difficulties. Her coworker thanks her for reducing the workload and consistently doing a good job. Baeksun laughs it off and insists she can handle it, but secretly appreciates the recognition. She jokes that her hair might be growing back after all the stress. As she enjoys the compliment, the boss arrives, returning from another business trip and still wearing summer slippers. He greets everyone and apologizes for frequently being out of the office. He suggests holding a company dinner the next day, especially since Baeksun seems to be settling into the team. The atmosphere in the office instantly changes. Coworkers start planning their own objectives and agendas for the upcoming dinner. Another plans to protect someone from predatory individuals they believe will lurk at the gathering. One individual intends to confess feelings to a crush during the meal. Baeksun contemplates how quickly alliances and rivalries evolve beneath the surface of the awkward small talk. Having just completed her probation period with some hair recovery, she prepares for the upcoming drama at the dinner, knowing that nothing at the company is straightforward. The company dinner begins with everyone gathered around a table, each person outwardly calm but inwardly occupied with their own thoughts. The boss makes an awkward toast, mentioning how fortunate they are to be together in this small company. He expresses gratitude to everyone for their patience and formally welcomes Baeksun as part of the team. Glasses are raised with forced laughter, highlighting Baeksun's feeling of being an outsider observing their group dynamic. Soon, smaller side interactions begin to appear among the coworkers. A shy coworker keeps glancing at someone across the table, struggling to gather the courage to express something. Another coworker watches carefully to ensure no one behaves inappropriately toward the new members, ready to intervene if necessary. Baeksun quickly realizes that every question and toast serves as a way for the group to evaluate each other. She notices one man wanting to talk to a woman nearby, but unable to find the right moment, and a woman feeling a need to share her feelings, but held back by tension. Once the drinks arrive, the usual subtle power dynamics begin to emerge. Someone insists Baeksun accept a drink, teasing her about having many friends to go out with. Baeksun responds that she doesn't have many people in her social circle. She adds that when she drinks, it's usually with her father on occasion. Her answer is met with laughter and disbelief. One person accuses her of pretending to be innocent and assumes she has dated many people. They ask about her type and make guesses, pointing to a coworker sitting nearby. The conversation shifts into a semi-joking matchmaking discussion, dissecting who likes whom and interpreting the meaning behind compliments. A coworker named Jukyung is mentioned in connection with Baeksun, which fuels further speculation among the group. The team leader joins in, pretending the discussion is all in good fun, though it is clear some members are weary of these long-standing inside jokes. After a few more rounds, the side conversations become sharply focused and tense. A man comments cynically that young women only choose partners based on looks, then shifts to boasting about his own past attractiveness. Baeksun and another colleague quietly note that the team leader always instigates awkwardness at company dinners involving female employees, making the situation uncomfortable. Jukyung bluntly asks why the team leader is more concerned with others' affairs than his own family matters. The room grows silent as this unspoken grievance finally surfaces. Although the tension rises, it is quickly masked by jokes and sudden changes of topic to preserve the delicate peace. Following the event, Baeksun quietly reflects on finishing her probation and regaining her hair, yet still feeling unsettled. Some co-workers discuss plans to quit or mention they have already left, contemplating their next career steps. One person states that once they leave, they will have to scramble to find another job. Someone asks Baeksun whether she intends to stay or if she is also considering leaving. Baeksun admits the team leader can be difficult, but notes she can now send money home and occasionally treat her parents, which matters to her. Being able to treat her family to a meal makes enduring the tiring social dynamics worthwhile, even if the work feels unrewarding at times. Others acknowledge her words without fully agreeing or disagreeing, too weary to debate further. The question of who will pay sparks more teasing, with Baeksun cast as the pampered one even though she is treating them. The table then bickers over whether the adults should let the youngest person cover the bill. An old saying about not disturbing a dog while it eats is mentioned to ease the mood once again. Time passes, moving from days into months. Baeksun remains at the company but is overwhelmed with overtime, having worked 15 days consecutively due to Jukyung's absence. Her manager points out minor mistakes she makes, demanding greater attention and reminding her that Jukyung used to handle these tasks alone. There is no winning. A mistake results in more work, while apologizing leads to additional overtime. Most days she leaves the office defeated after 3 a.m. Her life outside work is no better. Once, while inside a taxi and barely awake, she listens to the radio reporting the news. The taxi driver complains about the country's situation, apparently expecting Baeksun to respond or agree. Exhausted from the day, she simply blinks in confusion and does not offer any response. She slumps in the back seat, feeling partly like a passenger and partly like a leftover office worker, wondering how much stranger things will become before real change occurs. Baeksun wakes up already dreading work. She hopes for something, anything, maybe even a meteor, to knock her out of this cycle. Lying in bed, she complains that she absolutely does not want to go, but naturally, nothing cosmic happens. Instead, her phone buzzes with a notification. Early in the morning, she receives a surprise text from Baeksun, the team leader. He has sent her a breakfast delivery and reveals that he knows where she lives. Startled and a bit creeped out, she wonders how much he really knows about her. She contemplates whether she needs to reply to him about it. His tone is casual, but Baeksun recognizes that in her office, nothing ever comes without strings attached. Frustrated, she tries to get ready for the day. Upon arrival at work, she immediately comes face to face with Baeksun. He wants to talk and is unusually direct, asking if she dislikes him enough to lie to his face. He demands honesty and says he will give up on his feelings for her if she admits the truth. Baeksun panics. Feeling the pressure, she is unable to respond, so he drops the subject and walks away, indicating he does not require an answer. For a moment, it seems like it might be over and that he will leave her alone. However, he suddenly turns cold, calling her shallow and threatening to ruin her. Baeksun is stunned, realizing that in this office, awkward moments never truly end but only shift in tone. The day presses on relentlessly. Every mundane work task becomes laden with petty power struggles. A co-worker asks Baeksun for a business plan, and when she attempts to deliver it to Baeksun, he snaps that he is too busy and tells her to wait. She senses that everyone is constantly watching for others to make mistakes. Baeksun tries to keep her head down, going so far as to turn off lights to save energy when alone, yet she can tell she is accumulating more chores instead of respect. Privately, a colleague advises her that Baeksun is more emotionally fragile than he appears. The advice is to be more empathetic toward him, but Baeksun feels drained. A co-worker's joke links Baeksun's name to a beer can, another petty jab that turns even an ordinary office object into part of the power struggle. That night, Baeksun is home alone, and her thoughts surge. She reflects on being stuck in a never-ending grind of overwork and politics, worrying that without winning the lottery, this cycle will continue forever, because she only finished high school and lacks a polished resume. She doom scrolls and discovers an interview with an online novel author. The article states that the writer made money by publishing stories online and won cash prizes. For a moment, Baeksun fantasizes about doing the same. She recalls being good at writing essays as a child, but then questions whether anyone would care now. Back at work, things become even more petty. She receives a late-night call to check a report for obvious typos, something even a child could fix. The implicit message is clear: any error can be turned into ammunition against her. Eventually, Baeksun reaches her limit. She drafts a resignation letter explaining that her health has declined and she needs a break. The boss dismisses her concerns and urges her to keep working until next month. It is the same unending cycle. Burnout is just part of the job, and nobody pays attention. Adding to the mess, Baeksun accidentally sends an embarrassing message to her boss that was meant for elsewhere. The next day, the boss confronts her, insisting on respect due to his age and position, and jokes that she seems to enjoy getting scolded. Mortified, Baeksun blames her cat for the accidental message and asks for forgiveness. Alone, she admits that unless she takes radical action, she will continue moving from one miserable company to another. Desperate for change, she again considers writing, wondering if it could be worse than her current situation. Eventually, she tries to lift her spirits, deciding maybe to give it one more day or to begin planning an escape. For now, she remains exhausted and trapped, waiting for something to break that isn't just her. Nothing changes that day. The company keeps turning, and every new plan still becomes more work for the people at the bottom. Baeksun wakes to a surprise. Her belly feels softer than she remembered, and she notices some extra weight around her middle. She pinches it in front of the mirror and criticizes herself for having eaten so much delivery food just because she had some extra allowance. She reassures herself it does not matter, since no one is likely to see her stomach. However, the thought nags at her that since she has no other plans, she might as well try exercising. She puts on a sweatshirt, steps outside, and clumsily commits to a run, motivated partly by pent-up frustration with work. Feeling self-conscious, she decides at least she can do this one thing for herself. That burst of energy fades quickly. Barely out of the gate, her lungs start burning and she gasps, reality settling in rapidly. She slows to a walk, reasoning that it is better not to overdo it on the first day if she wants to maintain exercise habits. Her nose, more sensitive now, picks up a delicious smell coming from nearby restaurants. Instinctively, from years of living in the city, she recognizes that such groups are often conducting surveys and target polite passersby. That scent shifts her thoughts back to food, and she hurries home, doubting her willpower if she stays out longer. Up ahead, she notices a group of 3 strangers who appear to be students by their appearance and grouping. While walking, she becomes highly aware of her surroundings. To avoid interaction, she avoids eye contact and attempts to speed up. However, she does not succeed. Just as she tries to pass by, the group singles her out. They greet her and ask if she is a student before explaining they have a quick survey for a school project that won't take much time. She stammers an excuse about an urgent appointment, but they press for 5 minutes of her time. She repeats her excuse, trying to walk away, but one member pushes forward again. Another student suddenly intervenes, yelling at the group for being pushy. This escalates quickly as the newcomer, with bright yellow hair and confrontational energy, exchanges insults and threats with the trio, creating a scene on the street. Recognizing the threat, the original group retreats, calling the yellow-haired person a nickname as they leave hurriedly. Baeksun watches the person who starts muttering about handling troublesome people and oddly mentions wanting to rip mouths open. After a pause, the yellow-haired person recognizes Baeksun as a neighbor. Baeksun is caught off guard as the neighbor loudly greets her and references a past event. The neighbor blames Baeksun for an embarrassing incident in an alley and insists it was Baeksun's fault. Baeksun, confused, denies knowing what she means, which frustrates the neighbor further. The neighbor refers again to the previous occasion in the alley, but Baeksun struggles to recall it. Suddenly, Baeksun recalls the memory. The neighbor apologizes thoroughly, explaining she was drunk and lost control, resulting in vomiting on Baeksun's clothes that night. Now in daylight, she manages to deliver the full apology and pleads for forgiveness. Embarrassed, Baeksun says she cannot forgive the neighbor, especially because of how mortifying it was to wear soiled clothes afterward. The neighbor clings to Baeksun. Flustered but hungry, Baeksun's resolve starts to waver when the neighbor offers a peace offering, chicken. The neighbor promises to treat Baeksun to dinner in exchange for forgiveness. The mention of free food immediately softens Baeksun's annoyance. After a long period of work and isolation, a hot meal and some company, even with someone eccentric, feels like a gift rather than a burden. She agrees to the offer. The neighbor enthusiastically assumes this means forgiveness and begins leading Baeksun to get food. It feels a bit absurd and pathetic, how easily Baeksun's mood lifts at the prospect of simple comfort food and casual companionship. As they walk away together, Baeksun's day feels slightly less like merely surviving and more like a life worth living, even if only for the moment. For now, she sets aside thoughts of work and old routines, mostly wondering about extra sauce with the chicken, and if this counts as a fulfilling day. Baeksun tries to appear casual while walking with her neighbor, a younger woman who dispels every awkward moment with upbeat cheerfulness. They discuss why Baeksun was outside, and Baeksun quietly explains that she was just returning home from her part-time job. Another tiring evening. The neighbor asks if she was out for exercise. Baeksun shows little enthusiasm about exercising, especially when teased about her weight. She admits she might have gained some weight, though even that seems questionable to her. The neighbor offers to run with her next time, half-jokingly threatening to make her extremely skinny if she accepts, then adds that if Baeksun is late, she won't get any chicken. Though childish, the promise of fried chicken motivates Baeksun to start moving. They begin jogging, or something close to it. The neighbor quickly takes the lead, reminding Baeksun that if she falls behind, there will be no food left. Baeksun tries to keep pace but immediately regrets it. Her chest burns, legs ache, and she experiences a sharp taste in her throat. Though out of shape, Baeksun pushes herself to continue. Waiting at the top of the stairs, the neighbor encourages her, teasing that she might as well just walk instead of struggling on this faux run. At the finish, Baeksun is sweaty and gasping, but manages a faint smile. The neighbor goes to order chicken, asking Baeksun to clean up before joining her. Baeksun hesitates when the suggestion turns to eating in her own room. She shows a flicker of panic. Her apartment is messy and embarrassing for guests. The neighbor notices and proposes they eat in her room instead, excitedly and casually. Baeksun feels relieved but uneasy, regretting not refusing the chicken earlier. Inside, she is struck by the neatness, which is very different from her own cluttered space. Baeksun enters, expecting judgment. She lingers in the hallway before entering, hoping the neighbor might lose interest or forget. Instead, the neighbor opens her door, jokes about which side Baeksun's apartment is on, and beckons her inside. The neighbor is unpacking dinner and laughing about the spotless condition of the room. She jokingly suggests Baeksun might have secretly tidied up instead of showering. There is little awkwardness, as the neighbor remains loud and cheerful. They start eating the freshly delivered steaming chicken. Baeksun quickly begins eating and surprisingly finds the food very tasty. She comments on how good the chicken tastes. She inquires about where the chicken was ordered from. The neighbor happily shares it is from Makjang Double Chicken, an inexpensive place that seems to bring instant happiness this evening. Baeksun thinks aloud that she has ordered from there before and considers trying it again, a small detail that feels like a treat. They continue chatting while eating. Though the talk is trivial, about the chicken shop, Baeksun finds herself enjoying it. The neighbor apologizes again for past issues between them and says Baeksun is welcome to visit any time. She encourages Baeksun to join her next time she wants to exercise, saying she's often bored. Baeksun typically dislikes forced friendliness, but the mood feels comfortable tonight. She quietly agrees to possibly join next time. She is surprised she does not feel burdened by that agreement. Later, alone in a dark room, Baeksun scrolls absent-mindedly on her phone. She tries to process the day's activities, running, socializing, and the sweet, greasy fried chicken. It has been years since she ate with someone else, and that realization stings even in private. When she first met her neighbor, she thought the girl was a bit eccentric. Now, lying in the dark, she admits the neighbor might not be so bad. The exhaustion from running, warmth from the meal, and a hint of happiness finally lead Baeksun into an early sleep. At that point, the next morning, Baeksun is woken early by a message. A moment later, the neighbor, energetic as always, wants to exercise again. Baeksun looks at her phone in disbelief at how loud and inconvenient the day already seems. Her first thought is that it is too early for noise. However, her initial instinct is not to withdraw, but to engage. Though the cycle of exhausting company hasn't changed, she feels a little less like merely surviving and more like living, at least for now. A loud, messy plate of pet food hits the ground with a splat, and immediately a stray gray cat, rugged and wary, dives toward it. Hungry, the cat barely waits for humans to leave before eating quickly, almost finishing before a delivery truck passes nearby, making the alley shake. The cat freezes and crouches low, but when no danger appears, it resumes eating. It wipes its face with a paw and settles in a sunny spot, remaining alert and scanning for sounds. This calm does not last long. A flutter overhead sharpens the cat's senses. It looks up to see a bird hopping along a power line, but then notices a beige cat darting low in a sneak attack. Chaos erupts with birds taking flight and the gray cat rising to confront the beige one, its fur puffed, and it yowls a warning. The two cats face off, tails lashing, as they bounce between territorial markers, until the beige cat jumps a fence, and the gray cat follows, leaping from a garbage bin to a ledge. The gray cat slips briefly, scrambling, but manages to land on its feet, while the birds and rival disappear. Now alone and a bit embarrassed, the gray cat stops to lick its fur flat again. Suddenly, a loud human voice calls from just beyond a wall. A teen wearing a school jacket warns the cat to stay still and raises a phone, aiming it toward the cat's face. The cat remains frozen, uncertain, neither fleeing nor seeing the trap clearly. The girl speaks to the cat in a strangely sweet tone, praising it softly. She tries to take photos as the cat lifts its tail, glances at her, and flicks its ears, appearing bored, but she continues praising it. Using a sing-song voice, the girl calls the cat Mimi by name to coax it closer. Though skeptical, the cat allows her to approach within a step. Another girl approaches, slightly out of breath, and asks if the first is out exercising. The first girl, focused on the cat, waves off the question. She gushes about how perfect, fluffy, and cute the cat looks, nearly ignoring her friend's awkward stance nearby. The friend responds with amused exasperation and offers to help with the exercise because Baeksun is moving so slowly. While the girls talk, the cat sees an opportunity to slip away, its tail twitching as it seeks an escape. The cat passes a parked car just in time to overhear the girls' conversation about how Mondays are great and the best day of the week, a mood unusual for most. Suddenly one girl freezes, squinting down the street. There is something near the curb. A flash of a blue car appears, and a shout wonders if that is a cat in the street. The stray cat hesitates, caught out in the open. The blue car comes closer quickly. Just as a loud and sudden shout rings out, the cat bolts. The car swerves and brakes screech, making the moment feel like the world jumped sideways. The driver's face shows both horror and annoyance as the cat rushes to the curb, barely making it to safety, as the car speeds past with a narrow miss. After the incident, a long pause follows where only the cat's breathing breaks the silence. The girls stand frozen, shaken. One blurts out mid-laugh before falling silent, realizing how close the danger was. Convinced it is not safe, the cat slinks away down the alley. It disappears into shadow with its tail low but moving quickly, seeking a place no one can find. One of the girls watching becomes reflective. She wonders aloud why people bother to exercise like they just did, running after an animal and up and down the block. At that point, she questions whether it is to look beautiful or something deeper, like aiming to be happy long-term. A moment later, she half speaks to her friend, who is already trying to move on, ready to leave. The stray is gone, with only a few hairs caught in the breeze, and quiet returns to the block. For a moment, the day feels normal, but behind the walls and cars, the unsettled life of the stray continues, seeking a safe patch of sun. Rain traps her indoors, so she tries to shake off yesterday's stray cat chase by cooking for herself. She focuses on a tomato, holding a knife, feeling inexperienced but determined to make a decent meal. At that point, she watches the video tutorial again and reviews the recipe, which calls for beef, 2 tomatoes, half an onion, 1 carrot, basil, soy sauce, garlic, and some pepper. The instructions are quick and upbeat, explaining that even a beginner can do it, starting by cutting the tomato, scooping out the inside with a big spoon. She has many questions about the process. A moment later, she wonders if any spoon will do for scooping. She laughs quietly to herself and begins. The shopping list already seems inconvenient. Even so, she questions who sells half an onion or half a carrot. Doing the math, she realizes the items come in bags, so she decides to buy whole quantities, thinking she can handle leftovers later. When she unpacks her groceries at home, she notices she lacks plum extract, cooking wine, and even basic pepper. She decides to improvise, hoping it will turn out fine. The total at the cashier feels steep. Instead, she only bought beef, vegetables, sauce, and basics, yet the cost is 40,000 won. The price feels harsh. She fumbles at the register and is asked about loyalty points, but she has none. By then, she carries her groceries home, lays them out, and resolves that this will be her luxury meal for the day, despite the cost. She dives into preparation. At that point, she arranges all the ingredients and feels a bit proud seeing fresh beef and solid vegetables. The first step goes better than expected as she puts the beef into a hot pan and enjoys the aroma. For a moment, she feels a sense of achievement. Then she chops the vegetables, adds them to the pan, and stirs everything with growing confidence, thinking she might succeed. Following the recipe, she adds water and tomato sauce but then stops. She looks at the pan with a frown. A moment later, she questions why there is so little liquid in the pan. The liquid ratio seems wrong. The dish now looks different from the video, and she wonders whether to add more water. She also considers adding more sauce, but the mixture only looks stranger. The stew simmers and thickens, but still seems off. Even so, she cannot recall if the stew in the video had this color. Her mind races trying to fix the stew on the spot. However, these adjustments do not improve it. She adds more tomatoes and sauce, attempting to replicate the glossy look from the video's final shot. Instead, she finally decides it is done, serves it into a bowl, and steps back to assess her work. She reflects on spending 40,000 won, but getting this result. Determined not to give up, she decides to taste the stew. By then, she recalls not to judge a dish only by appearance. She takes a spoonful, noting the lack of strong aroma and muted color, but hopes it might be better than it seems. At that point, she tastes it with cautious optimism. She briefly laughs at how she managed to mess up such a simple dish. The taste immediately proves disappointing, offering no real flavor. The stew is bland and watery, with neither beef nor tomatoes improving it. Still hungry, she sighs and attributes the failure to online recipes. Checking the fridge, she finds a backup bag of frozen chicken nuggets. A moment later, she reminds herself that chicken nuggets are simple and reliable for comfort food. She decides those internet recipes are often misleading and don't work as shown. She puts a batch into hot oil, seeking comfort while brushing off the stew's failure. As the nuggets fry, hot oil splatters unexpectedly, causing her to recoil. She reflects that happiness in cooking might not require starting completely from scratch. She learns that cooking experiments, like chasing after stray cats, can be humbling. All she has from the day's effort is a messy kitchen, a flavorless stew, and a new appreciation for ready-made snacks. A minor kitchen accident rounds out an already poor cooking experience. Currently, she is content with having something crispy and easy to eat, hoping future meal preparations will be less intimidating. She is looking at the glow of her phone in a dim room, checking her social feed. At that point, she scrolls through updates of people posting their workouts and healthy routines, each picture of a smoothie or flexed arm gathering thousands of likes. Each new post creates a growing emotional distance between her and the world. She feels that everyone else is progressing in their lives and achieving goals while she remains stuck. The only activity is the algorithm showing her people who seem to have it all together. Her gaze shifts away from the phone and lands on the cluttered mess in her room. Dirty clothes and dust have accumulated in the corners, the typical clutter from being too tired to care. Suddenly, an advertisement appears on her screen featuring a fancy mop spinning like a power tool and promising effortless dust removal. The ad uses classic infomercial tactics. The mop head never needs to be wetted first, and it boasts ultimate rotational force and effortless wringing. The actress in the commercial appears thrilled, just holding the mop. For a moment, she feels tempted to try it herself. She wonders why not give it a chance. She considers that a sparkling clean room might represent a fresh start, so she places an order for the mop. Though the mop is not cheap, she recalls the commercial's promise of an easy cleaning solution. A few days later, the mop arrives in a box. She opens it while feeling a small buzz of anticipation about changing her life with this gadget. Inside, she finds a thick instruction manual. Step 1 instructs her to attach a new cleaning cloth to the brush head. This proves difficult as the cloth won't fit properly and her fingers fumble with the snaps, causing annoyance within minutes. Step 2 is to fill the water container and snap it onto the handle. The container clicks awkwardly and feels heavier than the mop appeared in the advertisement. Despite this, she continues, determined to see if the mop can be the improvement she hopes for. When she presses the lever, water sprays in a messy arc. The mop does not glide effortlessly like the actress's. Instead, it causes a half-controlled splash and emits a squeak. She persists with the cleaning. Under the table, the mop reaches corners she had never managed with a rag, capturing dust bunnies and crumbs she hadn't noticed before. For a brief period, she makes a game out of cleaning, feeling like she is launching sneak attacks on hidden messes. This brief burst of energy causes her to grin despite herself. Although her place is not perfect like Instagram photos, it begins to look and feel somewhat lighter. Days pass. The enthusiasm for the new mop fades. Her place becomes messy again. Nothing catastrophic, but everyday clutter accumulates. Then she accidentally grabs the wrong bottle from the fridge, opens it too quickly, and cola sprays out, leaving sticky puddles on the floor. She groans, but remembers the fancy mop she bought. At that point, she considers this spill as a chance to test the mop's usefulness. A moment later, she prepares the mop, fills the tank, mops the floor, empties the basin, washes the cloth, and wrings it dry. Cleaning the spill requires 5 separate steps. She sweats and tires as she checks each step off the list. By the time she's finished, the floor is technically clean, but she feels exhausted again. She briefly considers a simpler solution. She grabs a pack of wet wipes, cleans the sticky patch directly, and throws the wipe away. The surface is clean within a minute. This keeps it out of sight, out of mind, and perhaps out of any future cleaning impulse purchases. She laughs quietly, thinking the inventor of wet wipes deserves recognition for a tiny tool that works without hassle and requires no tool cleaning afterward. The mop then occupies space in her small bathroom, with its handle bumping her when she enters the shower. She pauses to stare at the mop leaning in a corner. The promised effortless cleaning now seems to have shifted into effort spent on setup, breakdown, and storage, instead of hands and knees scrubbing. Her cleaning motivation fades again as she looks at the mop, questioning the purchase. She wonders if all the hype around the mop was for nothing. The mop is large, awkward, and now mostly in the way since the novelty wore off. She considers aloud whether she should simply discard it. Recognizing that bathroom space is limited and valuable, she instead attaches a cheap adhesive hook to the wall and hangs the mop out of the way. Though there is not much satisfaction in the moment, she feels relieved that anything making life slightly less annoying is allowed to remain for now. Baeksun, 26, unemployed, lies in bed overwhelmed by despair. She feels utterly miserable, her thoughts cycling through all that has gone wrong. There is an upcoming open call for web novel submissions, an event she once believed could change everything. However, with only a day left before the deadline, finishing in time is impossible. At that point, she finds herself behind schedule yet again. The pressure mounts as she wonders how her life became stuck in this situation. She does not have to think long. Whenever she feels stressed, she either naps or binge plays games. This time, she convinced herself that inspiration would come if she relaxed, planning to double her writing output tomorrow. Instead, she wasted hours scrolling through short videos, and now the heavy malaise she was avoiding envelops her like a blanket. A moment later, she considers giving up on this submission and letting it pass. Her motivation has vanished. She knows the open call will return, but everything feels increasingly difficult and impossible. She attempts to refocus, but her willpower dwindles even faster. Baeksun ends up stumbling outside in her pajamas, hoping the cold air will clear her mind. She recalls that things were not always this bleak. After quitting her miserable job, writing freely for its own sake used to come more easily. Since she started dreaming about winning the prize and achieving success, simply sitting down to write has become nearly impossible. She checks her website. At first, people actually reacted positively to her posts. Comments appeared, providing small boosts to her confidence. But recently, her page has become deserted. No likes, no feedback, nothing at all. She grimaces, thinking she might have been better off pursuing a civil servant job. The problem is her test scores were below average, making that alternative unlikely. While she is lost in thought, a notification sounds. She receives a new comment, her first response after days of silence. Her spirits lift briefly, only to drop when she reads that someone finds her work boring. The comment adds that if she did not focus on the same topics daily, her work might improve. She resists the urge to reply harshly, reminding herself that snapping at critics online would not help her become a best-selling author. Frustrated, she tries to renew her focus. Time is running out. She considers this submission window to be her last chance to reclaim some dignity. She tells herself to finish the story and submit it. With her head lowered, she leaves her apartment and walks the familiar streets, half on autopilot. She does not even need to look up to find her way home. Caught in thought, she almost misses a random song drifting through the air. The upbeat melody sparks a faint light of inspiration in her mind. The lively rhythm rekindles her imagination unexpectedly. She allows herself to daydream for a few minutes and suddenly, her perspective shifts. She imagines herself as a famous author. Her book, Pickle Thief's Secret, is trending online. Everyone discusses it. Strangers in cafes and subways rave about the latest chapter, making it the topic of choice for her generation. She blushes with pride, unable to suppress a subtle, pleased smile. For a moment, she envisions herself as the center of a crowded room, with many clamoring for her autograph. Some fans compete for her attention. In the fantasy, she is asked for a picture and signature, but is too busy for that. She has important errands like donating to a fancy bookshop or ordering a burger with every topping at a late-night diner. Her imagined parents beam with pride in her success. She owns a large house, so big it is hard to keep clean. Despite the family jokes, she feels the overwhelming sense that this is the life everyone wishes for her. She indulges the fantasy a little longer, then pulls herself back to reality. Even if she fails, she recognizes the need to keep making efforts instead of waiting for luck to change her situation. She understands that change requires action, not just dreaming. Baeksun returns home and dedicates herself to her work one final time, resisting distractions and despair. Though it is not a masterpiece, she completes the story. Upon submitting, relief washes over her, and she relaxes with a tired but proud smile. She accepts that she probably will not win, but for the first time in a while, she can sleep without guilt. Without warning, her neighbor calls out to her loudly, interrupting her rest. Baeksun tries staying silent and hopes her friend will give up and leave. Baeksun makes no effort to hide her lack of enthusiasm. Despite her complaints, she admits that after each forced activity, she does actually feel somewhat better. This contradiction annoys her. The neighbor insists it is time for Baeksun to exercise. She internally dreads the exercise, especially since the neighbor seems overly eager to involve her. She listens for a chance to sneak out but is caught peeking and revealed to be hiding at home. However, this tactic fails. Baeksun barely has time to feel satisfied finishing her story before her life abruptly changes in a somewhat absurd way. Baeksun ends up dressed and outside again, trapped in a seemingly endless routine. Escape is impossible. She reluctantly opens the door, momentarily wishing she could teleport away. For once, her curiosity is aroused. She wonders why her neighbor keeps showing up. She questions what the neighbor does during the day. Baeksun doubts the vague explanation that the neighbor has a part-time job, because she is around too often. Baeksun considers the possibility that her neighbor might also secretly live a shut-in lifestyle. This idea amuses Baeksun, as it would mean she isn't alone in her unusual existence. That day, the neighbor suddenly says she must leave because a part-timer skipped work. Baeksun finally asks directly where the neighbor works. The neighbor responds with a knowing look. She notes Baeksun's sudden interest. The neighbor reveals she manages the local PC room, the gaming cafe nearby. Baeksun tries to hide her surprise. She immediately imagines typical gaming cafe stereotypes: neon lights, noise, endless snacks, and eccentric regulars. She silently wonders if there are any perks involved. The neighbor does not wait for further questions and invites Baeksun to come see the place. Though Baeksun mistrusts the explanation, she decides to tag along, since it seems easier than arguing. The PC room looks surprisingly modern from outside. It reminds Baeksun more of a study cafe from her elementary school days, rather than the chaotic gaming den she expected. Inside, the equipment looks nicer than she anticipated for a modest neighborhood spot. There are more empty seats than customers, suggesting the job might be low stress. The neighbor immediately becomes busy, switching into manager mode and directing customers. One regular refuses to use the updated computers, claiming he doesn't know how. Baeksun observes the neighbor's irritated reaction. The neighbor tells him to learn how to use them in a somewhat impatient but natural manner, as if she's said it many times before. Before Baeksun can find a spot for herself, the neighbor counts heads. The neighbor suddenly tells Baeksun to watch the place while she deals with an emergency. Baeksun tries to object, but is quickly handed the role of temporary PC room staff. Her friend trusts that, since there are few customers, nothing could go wrong in a short time. Baeksun regards this assumption as hopeful, but possibly ill-advised. Now, Baeksun, who recently feared throwing out a mop, stands behind the PC room counter pretending to know what she's doing. She surveys the mix of regulars and newcomers, wondering how she ended up here. Her neighbor's life seems chaotic, covering for absent staff, handling cranky customers, and running errands. Yet Baeksun thinks her own aimlessness is not so different, just more private. She hopes this might be the easiest part-time job ever, at least until a problem arises that she can't handle. Baeksun's brief time as accidental manager feels like significant progress for someone who recently felt like quitting everything. Though uncomfortable and awkward, it's the most movement she's made in a long time, even if forced by her neighbor. She almost laughs at the situation, thinking that if managing a PC room is what it takes to get unstuck, then maybe her life isn't the only absurd one. For now, she decides to go along with it, realizing it's better than staring at a mop and waiting for inspiration. Please support the official release.